I'm muted. Okay. There we are. Hello. Hopefully we have some watchers on YouTube tonight. Sorry for last month's snafu. I think the geyser out in our parking lot created by the blowing of the fire suppression line created a little bit of problem with our Google Fiber, but not too sure what went on there. But we still have the remnant of the pipe out there with the large hole in it if you want to stop by and look at it. So tonight's going to be a fairly simple meeting. If you have any new members, say hi on Facebook or on YouTube rather, and Chris will holler out the new members. And if we have any guests watching for the first time, hello, welcome to the Guild. Normally during these meetings, we also introduce other classes that are coming up to the Guild, go over our financial report, and talk about all good things about the Guild. Go online to kcwg.org, that's the Guild's website, and you'll see the different classes that are slowly coming back in as we make our way through this pandemic. Also, the special interest groups, we call them SIGs, Special Interest Group. They are also meeting, each different SIG, whether it's scroll saw or hand tool SIG, the power tool restoration SIG, they're all meeting. Also the woodcarver SIG too, that's a good one. Tonight we've got Cal Hobbs with us. He's the vice president of the Guild, and his father will be teaching a class here at the Guild, which is interest groups. We call them SIGs, Special Interest Group. Sorry? They are also meeting. Okay. I'm hearing the feedback here. And there's 2 openings left, I'm being told by Calvin, for a Queen Anne chair. It's a beautiful chair. You can see pictures of it on the Guild's website under the classes that's being offered. So about 2 openings left, and this is a world-class instructor from a world-class woodworker, and we're happy to have his son here tonight. Anything else we need to talk about, Chris? We have any show and tell items? No show and tell items sent in this month. So anyway, we're going to turn it over to Calvin, and he's going to talk about, it was fast, isn't it? We're going to turn it over to Calvin, and he's going to talk about this beautiful table sitting right over here. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Cal. Is the mic working? Everything working okay? Most of you who've been around the Guild know me. I've been a part of the Guild since 2007 when we moved back to the Kansas City area. And most of you know, but if you don't, I grew up building period furniture with my dad. It was his living. So when I was growing up in high school, I built furniture with him. So as an adult, I've been trying my best, although I'm not a professional woodworker. I've been trying my best to carry on the traditions. I'm known as the period furniture guy. So if you need, if you're all ever around and you want questions, you have questions about 18th century furniture or, Chippendale, Queen Anne, federal style furniture, I'm probably your guy, or at least I can get you in touch with someone who knows how to answer your question. And I love people asking me questions because I learn a ton because I love to talk about furniture. So, in fact, my wife probably thinks I talk about it too much as it is. But I do have one show and tell. Let's start by bringing up the power. Well, let's start by looking at the piece of furniture here. This is a hall table that I actually taught building a hall table at the Guild back in 2018 maybe, and it was just a simple table. And then of course this year, as some of you may have seen in the newsletter, I was determined to finish some of my unfinished projects. So I put that in the newsletter a few months ago. So this is my second of my unfinished projects, but of course, as usual, I like to jazz things up. I like to add carvings. I like to add period details, and that's really what the program is going to be about tonight. So I'm going to walk through all of the decisions I made and a lot of the details that ended up going on this table. So let's start with the PowerPoint. Oh, go on to the next slide. So very simple, right? You all know any table, most tables, and it could be 3 legs or it could be more legs, but most all tables are going to be 4 legs, 4 rails on the top, and almost everything is built off of that. And by the way, I wanted to be clear. I picked this up. This is like the first internet image I found. It's like wayfair.com. I'm sure you can buy this for $59.99 or $39.99. I don't even know what the price is, but this is not my work. It was something that was a mass factory made. So I think I could make a pretty decent version of that if I needed to. But let's go now to start talking about some of the things that I did to advance the design of this table. So next slide. So going from just a square leg is functional. It can be attractive. It depends on what aesthetic you're going for. If you're wanting to refine your designs, a lot of times you're going to start with your legs. A lot of shaker things might do tapered legs, might start big and go small. It takes a lot of the light out of it. This table, going for sort of more of a Chippendale style, I went for a chamfered leg. So let's go to the camera there. If you can see, as you walk around the table, it starts, it's kind of hard to show, but it starts off thick, and as you walk around it, it has a lightness to it. And the big reason is you chamfer the back, because as you turn a leg diagonally, it gets fatter and fatter as the corners get far, as your eye sees the corners. So one of the tricks that were done was chamfer the back. It's a very simple detail. It has a few quirks in building it, but if you the way that I typically do it is it's a lot easier if you're running it out all the way to the ground without a foot. You can lay it 45 on a table saw, cut it to a stop, and then just carve the little lamb's tongue, as you would call it, or a little half round. Since this one had a lamb's tongue on both sides, look at the bottom, Craig. This one has that detail on both the top and bottom. I had to lay that out, and I cut it with a draw knife, and I cleaned it up with hand plane. So it's really simple. If you lay it out well and you cut it to your line, it really takes a lot of the heaviness out of the leg. The next thing that I did was I added these molded feet. So these are just, it might be debatable whether these are attractive or not. It does make a piece more decorative. It adds obviously a heaviness, just kind of changes the stance, makes it more of a masculine table. Are we allowed to say masculine and feminine anymore? But it's more of a masculine detail. It was very common in the Chippendale era to have this, and me being a period guy, I'm always attracted to period details. I want to talk a little bit about how to build this. Go to the next slide. And I have this here, Craig. I don't know if can you pull that to me? But you essentially take an offcut of a relatively wide board, and it's a little tricky. But you run a molding on the top of this, and I did this with a router, and I think I cut this little fillet with a table saw, and then you obviously need to clean it up. But when you look at the bottom of the foot, you probably instantly think, man, that's pretty labor intensive mitering those all the way around the corner. There's nothing mitered here. It's just butt joints. So you take the biggest piece on the front, butt them to the sides, and then fill in at the back. So because it's all straight grain, you can't see it. I don't know, Craig, can you? It doesn't jump out at you. I'm sure you could find the butt joint there, but there's a butt joint right there. But that leaves a little bit of carving and cleaning up at the top, but a little bit of handwork makes things fun. Go to the slide again, Chris.
Yeah, we're getting comments about the audio, so I'm going to give you a different microphone.
Okay, hold on, we're getting audio. We're going to switch up the audio.
So we're going to try. Let's go ahead. Try putting that on.
I can also switch to the other mic if that works.
Let's hope this works better. So we'll see.
Okay. You all out there, let Chris know if this is not working. So I've got a new setup. Like I said, go back to the slide, Chris. One thing, if you look at the picture down at the bottom, if you just tried to apply that right directly to the leg, it leaves a lot of room for it to slip and slide. So it helps here to cut a little rabbeted section, and you can trim that. You can lay that out really neatly with just a knife, and you can cut that pretty close with a table saw. Trim it with a knife and chisel if you need to. It gives you a perfect place to reference. So when you put that on there, everything stays nice and tight. So that's one of the tricks if you ever want to try those. So that's how I went about sort of designing the legs. So let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. I was just curious, if you so chose to, could you put like a lion's foot on that bottom?
I'd have to. You couldn't. There'd be certain designs that would work. There might be your typical sort of ball and claw foot would be really awkward to try to go there without. The ball and claw foot kind of needs a cabriole leg to sort of balance the curvature to it. So coming off a straight leg, you'd have to go into more like a Spanish foot, which is another type of detail that kind of goes from square to flared. At least that's what I would choose. Obviously, creativity being what it is, we can do whatever we want, right? So the next thing we're going to look at, going back to the slides, we're adding a drawer. So when we did the hall class, we had just a simple drawer. This is a very typical half-line dovetails. I don't know if you can see those half-line dovetails. You can see the bottom slides in from the back. And what's interesting here is that I added this detail called cock beating. So what this is, it shows there's a little bead that's proud, so that when you put the drawer in, it gives you a nice added detail. The way you do that, you cut these strips, and you cut a rabbet in your drawer, and you just glue it and nail it as you need to. I think I just glued all these because they were small. It's just mitered on the corners. And usually, if you see things that are done incorrectly, a lot of times this bead is made too fat. It usually looks really nice if it's really small. You see this is probably about an eighth or less. I would say that an eighth or 3/32 is probably the limit. If you made it a quarter, it's probably looking too fat. Obviously, design is a matter of taste, but if you're trying to follow correct period details, usually that needs to be nice and really sort of small. And as far as the protrusion of the bead, the protrusion should equal to the radius of the round over. And the way I made these is I cut the strips on the table saw, rounded over the top with a block plane quickly, and I ran it through. I made a quick scratch stock, which unfortunately I've taken apart and used for other things, or I would have brought it today to show everyone. So pretty quick and easy, but that's a way to add a drawer and dress it up. You know, woodworkers are famous for bringing up their mistakes. And I will say, I made a horrific mistake on this drawer. And I was telling Craig earlier, but you see this is just a fake inlaid keyhole escutcheon. I had this all ready and I had everything final sanded, and I went to inlay this, and I inlaid it perfectly. And I looked, and I had inlaid it in the bottom half of the drawer. And I was so angry at myself, and I set it aside. I was trying to figure out, okay, how can I come up with like an inlay detail or a carving, or can I patch it? Can I live with it being upside down? All of those were no. And I was talking to my brother. He says, you know what you need to do? You need to bust the drawer apart. So it made sense once I realized it was only like an hour setback. But so I busted the sides off, flipped the drawer over, and thankfully everything was square enough that the drawer still fit. So that was. And if you look, you know, love to show all the things. If you look in here, you can see the old. Can you see that? Right? I don't know if it's light enough. I get enough light in there. You can see the old groove there. That was the groove from the bottom. So anyhow, I was upset at myself, but it turned out to be okay. So now you all know I make plenty of mistakes just myself. That's right. I think people like to say that you find out if you're a decent woodworker if you can recover from your mistakes, right? And it's character building, as my dad would say. All those lessons that your parents tell you, you know, still not fun. That's right. Let's go back to the slide, Chris. So we talked about the drawer. In fact, you can see that's a picture of it upside down. You can see the keyhole escutcheons in the bottom, and you're looking back into the drawer. So that was a bummer of a day. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. The next thing that I chose to do was, and hit that a couple of times. I think there's some. Let's get the. There you go, and go back one. There you go. So, blind fretwork. If you can see on the slide, one of the things that the 18th century was fascinated with was Chinese culture. You know, you see a lot of the old pottery or the wall coverings, the Japan chests. They were really fascinated with Chinese artifacts. So Thomas Chippendale, when he did his director, had a lot of references to sort of that Chinese taste, and a lot of the fretwork that you see on the slide comes right out of Chinese patterns. In fact, what's really cool is for a American period furniture guy like me, go to the Nelson, and upstairs they have tons of Asian artifacts and Asian furniture, and they have an amazing bed there that has all this Chinese Chippendale. It's not Chippendale, obviously, but it has this Chinese fretwork, which came straight from China. So that's what they were doing in the 18th century. So I just showed a couple of examples. The chest on the right is a chest from Charleston. Well, it's my copy of a chest from Charleston. That I built that double chest about 10 years ago, and you see it has fretwork around the corners. The chair on the left is a famous chair owned by William Penn, the governor of Pennsylvania, and it has some of the same elements of this table, but it has the work on the legs. It has the molded foot. It has the Gadrooning, which we're going to talk about. Go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about how to make it. Hit that a couple of times. So in the case of that chest, when we did the molding around the top, we laid it out on strips, and I sawed it with a scroll saw. I cleaned it up with files and chisels.
Let's try this one.
Okay, hopefully that's the ticket. So you see the strips there. Those were, the pattern was laid out, and it was sawed into strips and applied, just glued on. So that's one way to do it. In an area where you're going to get traffic or damage, like a chair or a table leg, it really is much smarter to carve it out of the solid. So when I went to do this table, go back to the slide. Getting that pattern on the legs was something I actually pondered about quite a bit, because my first thought was I'm going to make a template out of, like, masonite, maybe 1/8 inch masonite or 16 inch plywood, and then trace it on there. That just seemed like a heck of a lot of work. And then I said, well, I'll just lay it out on there, but with the radii being so big, that was going to be really problematic, and I was going to have to make jigs to turn the radius well off of the piece. So what I ended up doing is just some large format paper, and I laid it all out, and then I actually plotted it at my job site. Don't tell my boss. But I plotted it out at the job site. I'm a construction manager, so we have the ability to do large prints, and I glued it on with like spray adhesive. That seemed to be the best way. And then to hollow everything out, I used a small Dremel with a Stumac base that I could get pretty close, and then everything had to be carved out with chisels up to the line. So that was extremely tedious. I'm a fast woodworker. A lot of you guys know I like to go after it. I learned that from my dad. But going after this was a recipe for disaster. I would say the first couple of evenings I was pretty aggressive, and I popped several pieces off. You can see the residue on a couple of these pieces here where I had to glue things back. Some of the pieces are on short grain, especially right up at the top, right in here. These pieces are on short grain, so those are easy to chop out. Flattening them after carving, you would think that just is a long, laborious process. And even though I think it looks pretty good when you get up close and you get a raking light, you can see it's not that flat. But it also has a lot of handwork in there, so it's a level of acceptable imperfections. Does that make sense? But I think this is a very attractive detail. I've never done this on a table like this, and
I think it's very successful, but you know, that's my taste, and I was making it for myself, so it was worth the extra effort.
Cal, you mentioned that you glued on paper to make your pattern. I know you're a history buff when it comes to furniture. How would it have been done 100 years ago? Same way, or they just kind of hit and by golly?
I honestly don't know. I probably would have been drawn on the wood itself. They probably would have had a method to set the leg down into a table of some kind and turn the angles, you know, drawing it right on the wood itself. But honestly, I don't know. That's a very good question, because obviously they had paper, but it wasn't as certainly that type of scenario. No plotters, no photocopiers, you know. I'm not sure. Yeah. So that fretwork, if we, the scroll saw group does a lot of this type of fretwork. You know, this is just kind of applying scroll saw patterns all on a piece of furniture. So, John Tegler, if you're listening, you can be proud. Let's go on to the next slide. So most of you probably get the newsletter, and if you've read it, you see I did a how-to on Gadrooning. So Gadrooning is simply it's a term, it at least goes back to architecture and decorative arts from at least the Renaissance. And the Gadroon molding is essentially just a series of convex modules, if you will, in a line and put in a molding. And a lot of times they're separated by a convex area as well. That's not, sometimes there's no sometimes there's no concavity in it, but this gadrooning here was somewhat typical of an 18th century Chippendale decorative detail, and you can see it's just a rounded over molding that has been carved, and it's been carved pretty systematically. It's not super artistic carving. It's just workmanlike. Some of the things about this, I like how the details to miter the corners is something that is pretty important. I don't know if someone can. Yeah, just how the gadrooning comes together at the corner. That's the miter is better on this side, but of course.
Cal, one question going back to the legs. Is it carved or applied to the legs?
Yeah, they're carved out. All the fretwork was carved out of the solid. It is better. So, there's some layout considerations. You want to end on a convex. You want your middle section to be convex. So you have to be careful and watch your layout as you go, because you have to have a method for the gadrooning to go out towards the corners. Sometimes some of the more ornate pieces might have a bellflower carved into the center. Oh, I'm going the opposite way. Some of them might have a small carving in the middle. Some of them are plain like I left it. You see lots of different variations. So the cabinet makers back then were trying to make it work just like we were, but the better pieces usually were pretty well thought out. Yes.
So are you taking the gadrooning and then mitering it, or are you mitering the pieces and then carving in the question? Are you taking the gadrooning and then mitering it at the end, or are you mitering it first and then doing the carving?
Yeah, I mitered it all first. I did all my joinery. In fact, I don't know if I have a picture, but I actually have I cut a dado in the legs, so the molding actually sits back in. So similar to the foot, it gives you a nice solid place to register. And I did all the molding and mitered it first, and then I did all the carving of the molding. So I knew it would all fit. In fact, if we have a few minutes, I think we have time, I'm going to show a little bit, I'm going to demonstrate carving of the gadrooning.
While you're getting set up for that, a comment was made that says, I feel like trying something like this would lead to getting 80% through a piece of wood, then messing it up. So I'd never attempt anything like this. My question, do you have any suggestions for someone who's trying to get that motivation past that 80% point?
I would say just be bold, go for it. You know, if you mess up, it's only wood. That's kind of my motto. You know, I'll show a little bit. You know, just like practicing dovetails. You know, some people are intimidated by dovetails, but if you start with a couple of cheap pieces of wood and practice some, you'll get better. You know, having someone to show you is a good thing. But you know, I had a great teacher, but a lot of what my dad taught me was just give it a shot. He never showed me how to carve gadrooning. In fact, I'll give a little plug for this book here. I don't know if you can see this book. I'm a huge fan of books because someone learned it and put it down. Obviously, we have the internet now, so books aren't as. This is by Ron Clarkson, Making Classic Chairs. He has 3 books out there that are on carved pieces of furniture. But if you see on that chair, it has gadrooning and the apron, and he's got a great how-to, which I followed note by note the first time I did gadrooning, and I've done it maybe 3 or 4 times now. If you see here, I prepared just a flat piece of molding here, and long, yeah, and I actually took a hand plane and made a half round on it, and started laying out the gadrooning. So you want to make tick marks, and you pick whatever proportion you want. So this board is 3/4 of an inch thick, so I made them 3/4. You can make it leaner, you can make them fatter. You have some freedom here. Just know that when you get too far away from the classics, it looks obvious. So if you want to have classical proportions, there is an ideal that has been set back in the classical eras. Doesn't mean they're right or wrong, but it does mean a guy like me can walk in and say, yeah, that doesn't look right. So whatever that's worth, that's probably not worth a lot. But so I made laid out the tick marks, and it's important. It's easy to forget, but I always put a tick mark on the bottom too, and we'll come back to that and we'll see. I'm just going to rough out a couple of these. Going to be hard to talk and do this. Okay. Clamping is not that great. It was clamping well earlier. You want a sacrificial board under here because you're going to carve down. This layout here, just do by hand. You can just swing your wrist, and you kind of just go down the line.
While you're working that, got a additional question. But even a foundational piece, like rounding that piece with a hand plane, how can you make it symmetric? Is it all feel / experience?
There's a lot of both. I will say for the table, I used a router bit. For today, I chamfered it with a table saw and then used a hand plane and just did it visual by feel. So, but I did chamfer it first. With a hand plane, if I didn't have a hand plane, I would have chamfered it first with the hand plane or a draw knife or something, because it's good to use to work things systematically. So chamfering is a great way to start by rounding, because you can if you make your your three facets the same, then you round those facets, you're that much closer into being round. And it's like rounding a cabriole leg. That's all done by hand. You basically chamfer those with a draw knife or a spoke shave, and then you round them up. And so it goes from, there's systematic rules, and then you do, at some point you have to go from mechanical to artist to a little bit, but there's a lot you can do that's not all feel and artistry. Here, you start by just roughing this out, and that's why I have this piece of sacrificial wood there. Go right down the bottom. This cuts nicely going downhill, but not going uphill, so you just have to be careful. You learn which ways the grain works. Obviously, it's working well on this side, and not the other. Is it's as long as your chisels are sharp, you can do some of that. I'm not going to do too many of them. And we're just roughing this out here. Switch to a different gouge. I'm not a tool collector, but I've told people plenty of times I love collecting carving chisels. So woodcraft I've spent way too much money, especially when I know how much they cost woodcraft. But when you need the right shape, it's really fun. This is my favorite part of woodworking. So, and if any of you have taken any of my classes, whether it's like the carved Chippendale footstool or the carved chair, I love doing the carving. It's really fun. And I have a long way to go, but I think in general I'm reasonably good at it. So here, if you can see that, I've hollowed out 3 sections. So that just took a little bit of time. Could take a little bit of a smaller, come up as tall as you can. You don't want to get past where you're going to go under your apron. So you don't have to get too precise with this, because it doesn't want to look like it came off an assembly line. It wants to look like it's not going to look right if it's too exact. This is handwork, this is hand carving. After you get to here, you can come with just a flat chisel and start rounding over. And this one rounds over really well this way. The other way you can see is opposite. So you have to come up with a different method here. Not a different method, but you just have to switch it and be smart and go with the grain. Thanks, Mike. So there you see I have a couple, and then at this point, that's too rough for me. So this is a way to get things a lot clean them up quite a bit. We're just going to do this quickly, so you can take a lot of time there if you want. But you see that? Where did I go? Get the right light. You can see that it's already starting the ripple effect there. I'm having a hard time getting in the right spot. But You see that's already started. That just took a couple of minutes. Now, we have the tick mark. I'm going to want to draw those lines back in. Excuse me. If that makes sense, you draw those back in. And you know, without doing this part, yeah, so the line from the bottom helps you, gives you a nice reference, because if not, you would have potentially carved it off. So that's why I brought that up earlier. I need to put a sacrificial board, otherwise I'll jam into this workbench. At home, I would just jam into the workbench, but I'm not home, right? So now you take a V-chisel and just go right down that line. And a V-chisel by nature cuts with the grain on one side and against the grain on the other side. So usually the best solution to that is to make sure it's sharp. They're tricky to sharpen. I don't know, other than experience. You know, there's many times where I sharpen them and I think it's great and it doesn't cut. But thankfully, at this point, usually I can typically get a decent edge. You can really work these. You know, I like these lines to be clean and to have a nice flow. So you can definitely spend a little more time than this, making sure that they're clean. But can you see that well? You just come in there, and then we're almost done now. We just want to come in and round over the convex.
So with the V-curve, you're redefining your edges?
Yeah, so what we did with the line is added a nice solid detail between convex and concave. So it just gives it that in and out, just adds a lot of life to it, and it gives it a lot of great facets for light to shine off of it, so that it's just really it really gives it, you know, a lot of interest and character. So here, we'll do like we did before. We'll come back the other way and round the other side. These are really rough, guys. I apologize. It's not my best work. So then I like that bottom to be clean, so I'll come in and use a file just to clean up the bottom. Remembering that I don't need every facet to be out of this, because it's handwork. Sometimes the best clamp is just hold it against your body. Anyway, I don't know if you can see that, but you see it's got a good start. There's some cleanup there to go, but that's essentially how you do it. You can also come in at the bottom at the bottom of this, which I did for my piece. This is just merely a matter of taste, but you can come in right at the bottom. And chop out the bottom of that and carry that concavity around the bottom.
It doesn't have to be consistent either.
What's that?
It doesn't have to be consistent.
Why? Oh, you're looking at them on the bottom? Yeah, so the bottoms of those are just, yeah, it gives a, let's see where, you can see that adds, in fact, that made quite a bit of difference there. If you look at it on the screen there, it gives it kind of a jump up and down effect. Yeah, and the bottom is,
Just that little bit did so much.
yeah. So, you know, I would work this a little bit longer, obviously, if I was on the finished piece, but you see, I did that in just a few minutes. And you just work your way down. You know, woodworking is fun, right? It's okay to take a little bit of time to do some nice decorative details. So. Any questions about that? Let's, what's that? Okay. Let's go back to the table. So finishing here, it's not really a design element, but I'm a shellac and wax kind of a guy. I feel like I can do decent results, so that's what I did here. I did put a little aniline dye on the table to warm it up a bit. I think walnut sometimes, even if it's air dried, which this is air dried, you know, it could use a little bit of warming up. You know, the 18th century pieces that you see out of walnut, you know, the walnut gets like beautifully orange faded over time, whereas, you know, it's kind of grayish when you first cut it. Sometimes it's purple, sometimes it's brown, and it can be beautiful just with the finish, but I like to warm it up, so that's what I did here. Go ahead, Chris. Keep going. Yeah, those crazy animations. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to say, I really should have brought this up earlier, but back in the late 2000s, I went with my dad and my brother to a collection at the U.S. Department of State diplomatic reception rooms. So I don't know when it was, but I believe it was in the 80s. There were all of these dated rooms, and they did a massive renovation and renovated everything in sort of the high-style American colonial 18th century architecture. And then they have one of the best 18th century furniture collections in the country there. It's free to go see. Obviously, you need to get tickets well in advance and background checks and all that sort of thing. I've told everyone before I love books, so this is the book that I had. It's called Treasures of State, and I had. Let's see, can you see that? It's pretty. I had this book for years, and I found out that I could go see the collection. So one year I went, got tickets and went with my dad and my brother. And this table that I took pictures of was not in the book, and I've never found it. I've never found a photographic reference of it. But when I saw it, I just thought it was a nice looking table, so I put it on my bucket list back in 2009 or whenever it was. And I said, one day I want to build a table like that. So if you go back to the inspiration piece, or back to the slide, you can see a lot of the elements. It's got the gadrooning, it's got the fretwork, it's got the molded edge on the top, it's got the cock beading on the drawer. So really, I made the table to the size and shape that I wanted it, and I just took the period detail. So whenever you hear me talking about designing something, it means I've seen something I like and I'm copying it. I'm not really, you know, I don't feel the need to be super creative, but I do like to find some of the best pieces and try to copy them. So that made me make me more of a craftsman than an artist, but I'm okay with that.
So, question.
No, I did not measure it, so you know there's some rules of thumb there. So yeah, I made it to my own measurements. Although quite a few of the pieces in the collection in the book will give you the overall dimensions, so you can come take a look at the book when you're done. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite period furniture references, and there's a lot of amazing pieces in there.
So, one question I just had: do we have those books in the library? Have we looked to see?
I don't know that we have this book. We do have quite a few period reference books because I know that I donated several of them many years ago, and usually they're not checked out. I go back and look at them sometimes.
And the other question from YouTube is, when is Cal going to be teaching his period carving class?
Well, I do teach classes here once every year or two. I think I did a chest of drawers last year. I did this table the year before. I've done a carved chair, which was very challenging. I've done a couple of Chippendale footstools, which are challenging enough. I've actually taught that class 3 times, and I'll do that again. So I enjoy it. I think that when we
So Norm, if you're watching, he said he's going to teach a class, is what I heard.
I think, is there anything left on the slides? I think we're about done. Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, you know, I always put a plug in. I'm a member of the Society of American Period Furniture Makers, which means there's a few other people that are really nerdy like me that like 18th century furniture and like to make it and reproduce it. I am the chapter lead for the Gateway chapter, which is Missouri, Kansas, anywhere around regionally. And I haven't done a great job of having events in the last few years, but one thing that's interesting, if any of you are interested in the SAPFM, through COVID times, the Chesapeake chapter is now doing Zoom meetings. So I've actually attended the Chesapeake meeting last week, which typically I would never get a chance to do that because we're so far away from 18th century. The hubs of 18th century architecture and furniture are obviously much more on the East Coast, from Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Newport, Charleston, et cetera, et cetera. There's some great pieces at the Nelson. We did a tour last year going through the Nelson, and we'll do that again. So I've built a nice relationship with the Nelson, so it's kind of fun to go talk shop with them from time to time. I appreciate everyone's time. I hope that wasn't too laborious. And, you know, if you want to talk furniture, please feel to reach out to me. Thank you.
So that should be on. All right. Calvin, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we'll get your coffee mug here in a second for you. A dozen of them. All right. All right, let me step over here in the frame. Anything else we need to talk about? I can't think of anything. Mike, you got anything? Nope. All right. If you come to the shop, remember we're just limiting it to 10 folks in the shop plus the shop foreman right now. That may change. Coming up in mid-November, we are going to have Santa Claus. He's going to possibly, we're still working on the logistics of that, but invite family, friends, the little ones. They can come in and make a little truck with Santa and all his elves. So keep that on your calendars. That's around mid-November, but we'll figure this out as we get closer to it for social distancing and all that. So I have nothing else, so that's it for the Guild. We'll see you again the third Wednesday of next month for another exciting Guild meeting. Program to be announced.